So I'm going to talk about stuff for the next hour. It'll be like quasi-collaborative. Hopefully I'll do my best to like invite you into the inquiry with me. It's not like I've necessarily found particular answers, but I have a lot of thoughts and I enjoy sharing, and apparently people get a lot out of it. So hopefully it'll spark something meaningful for you, and we'll figure out some cool stuff together. And I'm going to do my best to weave in why I'm talking about this in regards to circling, and specifically how this could help you, whether or not you care about circling, or basically, I always find that circling points to something more meaningful, a different way of engaging that is more rich. So this particular talk, I've been thinking about these concepts, and I got inspired talking with a couple friends Saturday night. Giving talks is one of the best ways I know of like learning something and like finding the holes in my theories. So basically, I sometimes get a little bothered. Come on in. And those of you who are online, also welcome. Those who are here, we have an online community called Circle Anywhere, and they're invited to these talks live as well. So occasionally I'll look down there and make sure everything's okay and they can hear me and I'm not muted or something like that. And they'll occasionally throw in questions. They mostly just kind of have their own conversation. It's kind of crazy to read afterwards. So a lot of times, or every once in a while, someone new to circling will bring up the concept of safety. And particularly, I think there's this concept of psychological safety. And I actually don't really know what people mean when they talk about safety. It seems like such a wide range of things. So I started trying to like plot what it actually refers to, and we're going to do that together in a second. But basically, I think the concept of psychological safety is a meaningful one. It seems like it helps a lot of people. It helps like teams at workplaces kind of open up to each other and like develop more real trust. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I want to propose a different term that we are more about here in circling and surrender leadership, which I'm dubbing developmental safety. And actually, I looked up this term psychological safety. This woman at Harvard School of Business, Amy Edmondson, developed it in like 1999. And since she's like, yeah, it's actually not that great of a term, because the whole point is that the idea was that they feel safe enough to be able to challenge each other and speak candidly about things that like where they don't think this works. Or she gave the example of like Wells Fargo saying like, yeah, you try to sell 8 products to people and it was like impossible. And the administration that was saying this is the goal, like wouldn't listen to the candid feedback. So there wasn't like that kind of safety. So this original concept fits more of my idea of what I think developmental safety is. And that's the safety for us to be uncomfortable with each other and to go into tension and conflict and to show parts of ourselves that actually don't necessarily feel good on either side, because it's in that discomfort that we grow. I think this is what circling is inviting us in to over and over again. And the problem I see is that although there's all these amazing things I want to include about psychological safety, and I'm sure you guys can think of them right away. Actually, let's make a list. Like, what are some good things about being like that you would think of as a typical space of being safe together? Comfortable. Okay.
Like outcomes?
Outcomes. What's that?
No, I mean, it's a question. Like, are we looking for outcomes of psychological safety, or what?
What is it?
Okay.
Non-judgment.
Each person has, say, time and space to share.
Okay, this is great.
People not
Gives me a lot to talk about. People what?
not mocking you.
Not mocking.
Is that different from non-judgment?
Well, it's like even worse, like judging, but then it's like making fun of you.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just like being in a state where the map seems to match the territory.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So being in a state where the map matches the territory. I should be saying these out loud again. Sorry, y'all online. So we have comfortable, non-judgment, time and space, not mocking. The map matches the territory.
I think that you're not gonna make it worse.
Not going to make what worse? What's
Like
the
whatever
Not
conflict you're bringing into the space, like you're not gonna exacerbate it or make it worse. Does that make sense?
a little, yeah.
Room to fail.
Room to fail, yeah.
People are open to feedback.
Open to feedback.
Doesn't mean they always have to say yes, but so consent is probably involved too.
Consent.
Greater creativity.
Creativity. Okay, this is great. This is a great list. This list is triggering. Trigger warning, list, trigger warning, comfort, whatever. The joke is the point of the talk. I don't even have to talk anymore. No, really. I mean, like this is. I think this is really important because, like, I want to thread a line between I can say yes to every single one of these things, and I think we should. And like we also specifically say no to them in certain ways in circling. And I think it's important to set the expectations, like what you're actually getting into, but also hopefully I can show or we'll show together like why I think saying no to these is actually a better way of relating and being alive and being human together. So like the first thing, for example, like being comfortable, I just think it's impossible for us to, like, life is uncomfortable at times. And especially if you're coming to be, I don't know, to get more intimate, like you're going to, like the nature of intimacy is opening in certain ways that are a little scary and a little vulnerable. And the whole idea of like being vulnerable, like definitionally is uncomfortable because you're exposed. Like vulnerability and safety almost like categorically oppose each other. So we have to be willing to step into a kind of unsafety in order to be vulnerable. And we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I think that this is one of the things that's uncomfortable about circling for a lot of people is we're like, hey, we can't actually take the responsibility for you to be comfortable. We're going to do our best to be honest. We're going to do our best to be caring. We're going to do our best. In fact, I think that like what we're actually trying to do is like relax our self-contractions into a deeper alignment with being, which I think is self-caring. Like if you start to notice like, if you just notice what's happening in you right now, you'll notice that like there's already like I'm kind of tense and I'm like talking fast and I almost forgot that I really want to invite people into the state with me and self-conscious and all that stuff's going on. And like being is already having this huge yes to what's happening. And it is really uncomfortable. And so there's this kind of this yes is like naturally loving. And so we're like aligning with that. And we're like getting more and more out of the way of the loving yes that kind of is the nature of existence from this point of view. And my sense is that ironically, if we're not willing to be uncomfortable, then we won't actually align with that. We're kind of saying no to the nature of growth, which is uncomfortable. Or we're saying no to discomfort of like having our opinions challenged. And like circling is in no way about upholding your perspective or your point of view or your character or your personality. It's about the truth. And we find over and over again that when we surrender to the truth and like open to like what's here, all these amazing things occur and we change and we grow and we find a deeper love, but it usually comes through the process of letting go. Like a ton of ideas that I thought were really important and mattered to me get kind of shown up as untrue. And sometimes often they're relational things. Like I realized like, oh yeah, I'm more impacted by you guys than I would have liked to admit. And that's actually a truth. There's these like truths of interconnectivity that we open to. They're deeply challenging. Just wanted to pause for a second there. I felt like I was on a roll. It felt good. Annabeth was smiling. I was like, all right, I'm doing something. You guys laughing, that always helps me feel good as well. Thanks. So I think we could go through the whole list, and again, like there is a certain sense of comfort that, like, yeah, I mean, like we have to have some. It just, I don't know if this is actually true, but it seems like the fact is that people that come to circling have basically the basic needs met. Like kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like the bottom rung is met. So in that sense, I could be like, yeah, you have to have like certain stability in your life to be able to like to come and do this stuff. I don't think that's necessarily has to be the case. It certainly hasn't been for like the history of truth seekers the world over. Like there's plenty of ways you could find support for like, yeah, just giving up everything in service of like more honesty and more love. But yeah, I can honor that like there's a certain level of comfort that's necessary. And it's, I think going beyond that, it's like we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. I don't think non-judgment exists. I think we can redefine the word in a way where it's meaningful. And then I can be like, yeah, totally. But I have a note on this, and I'm going to read it so I can speak eloquently. Nope, I'm not going to read it. These notes just don't make any sense.
That's funny. Speak from the heart.
I know, right? There's a really cool principle that I really like. It's like kind of like, can you come to a situation with a sense of innocence? Like you real innocence in its like purest form is like I don't know. It like in not gnosis knowing. I literally just don't know what the hell anything is, what's happening here, what's now, like who I am at any given moment. I'm like I'm like a train in motion, and it's like hard to, I can't find my position and my velocity at the same time, because it's like I'm just this thing that's constantly being impacted and changing and all that stuff. So the idea of like coming to a situation with a kind of innocence, I think is really important. But I also think we're whole beings, and like if I try to assume that like, oh yeah, you're like my innocence is like I don't know what's happening, which could include that you're trying to manipulate me into like, you know, some really sinister thing. Right? I don't know. I'm very open to that possibility. If I try to cut out that possibility, I'm ironically like judging in the name of non-judgment. I'm like not coming with innocence. I'm not actually being with what's here. So I would replace this with like, I don't know, on innocent judgment or something. I don't even know what to do with the marker. Yeah, we're all like, we all have reptilian brainstems that like just want to like run away when shit gets hard. And we all have like the like mammalian cortex, which is like, you know, I need to belong. And if I get kicked out in some way, I'm probably going to die on my own. And like those are active and running all the time, and that's fine and healthy. I don't want to pretend like you're not an animal, and I don't want to pretend like you're not a mammal. I don't want to treat you like you're like you suddenly came into being and only in this day as you are in the 21st century, and forget that you like were like a baby that like pooped your pants and like all of that stuff, and that's still in you somewhere. And so I think it's like healthier, more honest, more loving, more innocent to treat humans as whole beings that are messy and like sometimes act out of like older systems, older survival systems. And a lot of times those older systems, in the way that older people are like stuck in their ways, but often wise, are stuck in their ways and often wise. And I want to like honor them. And that's what we do in Circle. We're like, huh, so this like, you withdraw when you're afraid you're going to lose the connection. That's interesting. And it's like obvious when you look at it that it's like a silly strategy to like in the moment, like you want to be connected and yet you're withdrawing defensively to preserve the connection. Like that doesn't make any sense. But like there's a wisdom to it. There's a reason that developed. And so we're like, cool, let's explore that. Let's kind of hold that with innocence. So in that sense, non-judgment is great. And I think that there's a sense in which, so if I'm like a being that has like all these different like shapes, and like this one is like dark and this one's happy and this one's like shamey and whatever, like there is a sense in which I can call forth relationally through the way I engage with you, what part of your wholeness shows up. Should I say that again? That was, yeah. There's a sense in which I can call forth a certain part of your being or your wholeness through my showing up. So if I show up with you with a sense of like openness to honoring whatever's there, you're probably going to show up in an honored way. Or more simply, like if I attack you, you're probably going to get defensive, right? So in that sense, like I think that's where you can kind of include this. But from a safety standpoint, it's not about the irony is that if I walk around like demanding you to be a certain way for me to be safe, I'm just never safe. I've like totally disempowered my capacity to like take care of myself because I'm requiring all of you, which are completely out of my control, to be something that I can't determine. And then on the other side, ironically, if I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'm going to adopt a stance of non-judgment, even towards everyone judging me, I call forth the wiser, more mature version of all of you in your judgments. There's like no demand on anyone else. And that's the sense that we're building and circling. And I think you can probably see very quickly how that translates to like a more loving, connected life. You don't have to have anyone be non-judgmental at your work or with your family, or maybe you're in a fight with somebody and you can just show up in a way that you've practiced here of like setting a strong boundary while being loving. And that, I mean, that setting a strong boundary is also really important and hard, I know, but it's just talking with a friend who is someone who's going through some really hard times with one of their parents having Alzheimer's. And so there's a friend of hers that just like they haven't been able to connect, and then he's like judging her because she's not available, and she's like, oh, I don't know what to do. And she realized like, oh, all I have to do is like tell him, hey, I'm available. I need you to understand where I'm coming from first. And if you're not willing to hear that, that's the end of the conversation. Like I'm done. And there's a way in which she can do that in total non-judgment and total lovingness. But there's a sense in which the safety is not that she's going to show up nice, right? It's going to be that she shows up honestly. I think that's the main point I'm trying to make that I'm coming to here with y'all. It's like, this is what we want to do here, what I want to bring in my life, and what I hopefully can inspire others, like hold a kind of candle in the darkness for others, is that honesty is in the long run more safe. It's just, it may be painful in the moment, but it's just always better.
So if someone said honesty, what would you have done on this list?
We can do the same thing with honesty, because there's a trouble. There's a trouble with a lot of times. This means people misinterpret honesty as, the question was like, if honesty showed up on the list, what would we do? It often shows up as like radical honesty. And I think that's less honest than acknowledging that we're in a kind of human collective. So me being like radically honest about what does that even mean? Like what, out of my like infinity, what am I calling forth to speak? If I'm radically honest right now, the truth is like I I think that myself is like a fake, it's like a fake idea. And so really, like, if I'm being radically honest, I should be talking like as infinite being all the time with you guys. And like, I hope that I can step to that. But usually that's not what like people mean when they say like be radically honest. They usually mean like share all your bullshit. And I think that's super dishonest. It just ignores relationship. Why would I say anything to you if you're not able to hear it? The whole point of communication is like a joining, right? So that's what I would say with that one. I don't need to go down the list. You guys got the gist. Yeah. Developmental safety. Should I put that on the list?
No, that's
Yeah, so I mean, there are some there's different ways to reinterpret these. Like I really don't support mocking. I don't want that to happen in circling spaces. I think it's dishonest. I think it's disowned. I think there are times that like in spirit of like, man, I've got this mocking voice in me that I want to bring forward to find out like what the deal is. Like, is this an energy that I'm like not welcoming in me that I need to be more honest about? Is it something in you that's like a kind of counter transference that I'm in, or all of like you can, and sometimes if there's enough like, kind of shared implicit context because we've practiced together for a very long time, that kind of mocking can come out without setting all that kind of pre-framing. So there are occasions where I think it's fine, but overall, like I'd stand by that one. Yeah, I think it's actually really hard to have a developmental safety, the way I'm saying it, when you're mocking, because most of the time people are just being dishonest. Although I know one guy who's incredibly good at doing mocking in a weirdly like self-effacing way, and like it's like you can never really tell like is he making fun of himself or you, and like he's kind of obviously owning it because it's like part of his character. It's really weird. So yeah, there's exceptions to every rule. And similarly, I don't know, like I'd have to talk with you, Michael, more about this or hear more from you. Yeah. I think that the map matching the territory, I think that is actually really helpful. One way this could be misinterpreted is if you were like, well, we have to have like shared group norms. And in a certain situation, you'd be like, yeah, great. And if you're not down with the norms, like you need to leave. But I think to really grow and develop, there has to have some room that you can challenge the norms, because we might all be in like a collective hallucination. We see this all the time. Like you all can think of groups maybe that you were a part of at one point that like had like a really strongly held belief that something was like definitely the case. And then once you got out of that, you're like, whoa, that was a really strange way of seeing the world. It was like definitely limited. So we want to have like, ideally, and this is what we try to do in circling, is like invite enough meta reflection on the context that's being set in the moment, enough like meta commentary about the norms that they can evolve to like hold more truth and like cut through more bullshit more quickly and lovingly. And I think that's part of what makes circling so awesome, is it's like constantly updating and like constantly improving and kind of adjusting to the context. And again, that allows you to do the same thing in outside of circling situations. So you can kind of see in the moment, like, oh, we're all acting as if we need to be, talking about the Longhorns football game, but I actually don't care about that. Like, do you care about that? Like, and then we start like going in a loving way, like, oh, if you do care about it, what matters to you about it? And you can start to like change the context while working with what's already there. And that's what we do in circling. Yeah, I find it hard to like nail the point I'm trying to make. Are you guys, am I making a point? What are you getting out of this?
I got it.
Okay, great. What are you getting, Brian?
I thought the point was something like, when you make psychological safety the priority, then you might be making a space that's not safe for development.
Yes, when you make psychological safety a priority, you might be making a space that's not safe for development. Yes, that's the point I'm making.
Spartans.
Yeah. And there's a way, it's not like, I don't think it's either or, like this is like psych safety and this is like dev safety. I think it's more like this. Maybe it's like that, like you cut out some of the stuff that doesn't fit, but for the most part, it's like you include the vast majority of what psychological safety is pointing at. Yeah, and you recontextualize it. You have this wider view that you can show, I don't know, like how it shows up developmentally or how it, the kind of historically or whatever. Like it's just situated in a much wider field. Or like I'm trying to do like, oh yeah, so that's the other thing. Oh, we're gonna go a whole new direction. You ready? It's exciting when you kind of go extemporaneously. It's like, man, we really don't know what's gonna happen. Okay. Okay. How are we gonna go this direction? My heart's pounding now. I'm gonna check. We'll check the internet. It'll make me feel safe. Okay.
Psychological or developmental?
I know, right? Okay. Can you notice that right now you're looking for something because I asked you to notice something? Do you have a sense of like noticing your search? And that sense of noticing, like, do you have a sense of its qualities, its isness?
Pretty intense.
Pretty intense. Intense. What else? If I can speak to that noticing of the noticing, what is that in you?
Seems like it's a dropping of the knowingness. Like there's a little bit of an anxiety, there's a little bit of a more attentiveness that has me more uncertain.
You're uncertain, and the thing that notices the uncertainty, you have a sense of that. Speaks that you can even notice as you're speaking it, right? So there's a sense of consciousness. Yeah, if you couldn't use the word cosmic, awareness for sure. What are some like? So let me speak to you as awareness and you as cosmic consciousness. What are you like?
I'm not my thoughts. I'm not like
No.
my body. I'm not where I am. I'm just like here.
I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my body. I'm not where I am. I'm just here.
Wherever that is.
Wherever that is. Yeah, it's like I am, and I happen to be here. But actually, here-ness arises in my amness. So in a sense, like if your thoughts are threatened, it's really no big deal because they're not you. And if your body is threatened, it's also kind of not a big deal because it's not you. And even if all of here is threatened, there's a sense in which it's not you because here-ness arises in awareness. And like when I speak of it this way, I feel like I kind of shade into an empty side of awareness. And if that doesn't resonate with you, it might be because you notice that you're kind of witnessing, or your awareness, or your cosmic consciousness. There's a kind of quality of engagement. There might be there's an embrace or a kind of loving, it's almost a compassionate quality to it. Does anyone feel that? That there's a sweetness towards what's happening right now. And when I kind of feel into me as this is that is sweet towards occurrence, it's almost like I am, I am that I'm not. In its entirety. Does that make any sense? Can you feel it even though it doesn't make sense? We got some shaking heads. It shouldn't make sense, so I don't know why I asked that question. Do you sense it?
Struggling with like the limitation of the vocabulary. It's like
Totally.
every word is just, it's got its own limitations. Like even if you say, I'm not this, I'm not that, what is it? And then if I'm cosmic conscious, like there's a limitation to that. Like there's an image that pops into my mind, but then there's even more behind, like what is that actually?
So you notice the kind of limitations of trying to give language to this, and and then
My
it's,
limitations at the very least.
and then you have a sense of like, you notice there's a my that comes in. You're like, oh, it's not necessarily out there, but it's like, there's something like me limited in my expression. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think there's a thing I want to invite you into, like remembering, I think is actually already there. It's like, despite the limitations, there's a kind of like loving yes is happening right now.
I feel like I could just stare at you and be in it.
Yeah.
And we can share that. But I don't have like the words to say. And sometimes I don't. Like when I hear somebody else, like I might believe that you know what you're saying and that it resonates for you, or maybe to somebody else, but that I'm not sure that I understand your experience just by the words.
Yeah. So my sense is like, one of the things we do in circling is we practice over and over, like this capacity to kind of disidentify and be into that like empty space, or I've called empty. We're like, oh wow, like I totally was, I thought the world looked this way, but when I saw the world through Alex's eyes, it looked totally different, and it also made sense. And so I kind of like pop out of my self-identity for a moment, or maybe a long time, and I'm like, holy shit, like almost like he lives in a totally different world. And it also makes sense and is coherent and like stays together. And then I like pop into Annabeth's world, and I'm like, whoa, and like they pop into mine, popping into them, and like it's like we just consistently pop out of like stuff. I'm like, yeah, I noticed there's like this, crazy sensation in my belly or in my heart, or like my back's tight. And weirdly, like in the noticing, I kind of like pop out of it. Does it make sense? Do you guys feel that popping out? That's where it's like really like a very traditional meditation. And we like help each other in that by like reflecting, just sharing directly back. Or it's just like, even like mirroring, reflecting visually. I do a lot of that. I love doing that. You guys see me do this a lot, where I like, especially if I'm meeting someone for the first time, and I want to like get a feel for them, I might like put myself in their position and like, try to smile the way you're smiling, and like, oh God, now I feel a bit embarrassed and nervous, and imagine that's how you're feeling, but also kind of liking the attention.
Like, should I move positions? While we play the game?
Right. So in doing that, it kind of, for a second, you get invited into seeing yourself in the mirror. And it's like a person that's mirroring you. It's an emotional mirror. It's a subtle body mirror, not like just a concrete or physical visual mirror. We give people like tone mirrors. Like when someone's like, yeah, I'm really excited about it. We're like, oh, really? Sounds like you're really excited about it. Becky, you want to say something?
I think that locates, like if I can move from my experience to my awareness to my awareness of my voice, what's doing the movement?
what's doing the movement of locating from like Becky to the awareness of awareness?
Yeah, you said pop out. I'm like, okay, but what's that movement?
I don't know. I don't know what that movement is. I think it's a great question. It's really interesting, right? So like we have this sense of like, oh yeah, I'm Jordan and I'm like giving a talk. And then suddenly I like pop out because like Becky asked me this question. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm giving a talk. Like, think like I'm being circled. Like she's asking me for like my immediacy. And like it's alarming, and it kind of like what is that can step outside of that like story generator that like made sense of reality for me kind of subconsciously, that I'm now like looking at directly, and like what's doing the looking, right? There's a new story that seems to be a little wider or more inclusive, but it's certainly like still here. I don't know, let's leave that an open question. I love the question, and partly I love it because if we try to answer it, we collapse around it again. But if we leave it as an open question, it becomes like a tool or a lever that continues to like pop us out. Like, yeah, what is that? What am I? And I start to contract around my selfhood again, and I'm like, ooh, like, what is that thing that like who and what is like picking a view? So weird. And it's kind of like comical, but it's also kind of majestic. And anyway, so we do that a lot in circling. We're like popping out. But I think the thing that makes it circling so unique, and a lot of other practices do this, but so it's one thing that makes circling unique. Obviously, it's this, confluence of factors. Is that we also are like, okay, as a popped out, can you also like jump in? It's almost like growing up and being an adult, and then like you see a bunch of kids in the pool, and you're like ready to like jump in and splash around and like be a kid again, and that like there's adult shit that you can deal with after that, but you can set it aside because you can like jump in and like play and have fun. And we basically do that with our selfhood. We're like these adult awarenesses that like jump into the pool of like being a human with each other and like splash around. So when you're an adult and you jump in the pool, if like the lifeguard whistles and is like, hey, like we're done splashing around for half an hour because there's lightning or something, you're super not threatened, right? It's not like it takes something away from you. You're like, we can obviously play elsewhere. We don't have to play. There's many other options. And this is like the thing that I think I want to train. I'm afraid sometimes the misuse of the concept of psychological safety like contracts us into the view of a child. And we lose sight of like, we're actually this like vast ocean of being, like showing up in a person with a particular point of view. But we're not actually this person. And we can just take a moment to like look at the self that we think we are. We can take that moment right now, and we'll notice that we're not what we thought we were, think we are. Like, I don't even know where to look. I start to look, and then I'm like undoing myself. It feels like this. For some reason, I'm like stiff in my arms. How are we doing? Any comments or questions? Bullet?
She said you just popped, so you just died.
I just died. Yeah, dying is a fine language for it. But phoenixing might be better because it's like there is always something there, right? Like it's almost like you can't destroy energy. It just like it's shifted around. Like there's always a new arising. And that's another thing that we practice in circling. And then what that actually ends up doing conversationally or like relationally is it means you're like incredibly flexible because you're just not like gripping tightly to something. And if you've ever tried to like it's kind of like the, I don't know, like if you ever practice like martial arts, like there is a place for like hard blocks or something like that. But even those, like they're in motion. And if you just try to like sit there and like take hits, like you end up breaking. It's like much better to be like flexible and like able to move and work with things. And it's the same conversationally. So yeah, you guys get it. Point made. Should I give examples? It's always better when I give examples, but I can't think of any right now.
And something that I observe for me sometimes when I've led an exercise at the beginning, like just notice your breath, I notice there's something funny about it. If I just say notice my breath, and you notice your breath, it's like suddenly if somebody says that to me, I notice it in a kind of weird way. I notice it by changing it, right? I almost can't just observe it. I necessarily changed my breathing. It's like, and I thought, why is that? What's up with that? And it's something like, I almost can't see it. It's like it's just happening. And I almost have to change it to feel some difference. It's almost like if I'm in a lukewarm bathtub, I almost have to move my arms to feel the resistance. Oh yeah, I get it. There's something there.
That's super interesting. I don't think I have that.
Okay.
I think as soon as I do a notice, like as soon as I noticing or notice anything, it changes the experience. Like the noticing is the movement in the bathtub. Like I could almost get paranoid, like I can't breathe naturally as soon as I recognize I'm breathing. Right? And there's like, I'm like, oh yeah, I start to realize there's always an interactive effect between awareness and happening. Is that word, like I don't know how to talk about this stuff, so I just make up words. Happening makes sense, right? It's like literally the everything that's occurring, period.
I like that way of talking about it a lot.
Good.
I have a question if you don't know where to look. Still?
No, I have a whole thing. It's gonna take way more than the 15 minutes we have left. If you guys want to get into it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Check it out. So we have this concept of safety. And I'm like, what the fuck actually is this? And so, especially when we're like looking as this like awareness, it can like manifest as stuff. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to see it because it'll help me like disengage and then be more playfully engaged or more lovingly engaged. Playful and loving, like I think they're basically like, sides of the same 30-sided die or something. Okay, so we have this quadrant map, which is super useful in the integral thing, and you don't need to know anything about it except that we're gonna like roughly look at like interiors, which is like I, we're gonna like roughly look at like interior collective, which is like a we culture. It'll all make sense in a second, even if it doesn't. We're gonna look at like it, just kind of like just stuff out there, and then we can look at like systems of stuff or like collections between stuff. So you have this map, even if you don't. And when you get we're gonna get super complex. Just bear with me; it'll be fine. What you can do is like you can see like different, like when I was talking about like the reptilian thing, like when I think of like what is safety? Basically, I'm saying like what's threatened, like what's my identity like attached to that could be taken away from me. That's basically scary. And so we have these kind of like concentric circles of like stuff that could be threatened at like different levels of development. Or you might roughly think about this as like when you're a kid versus like when you're an adult. So, for example, I'm going to populate a few of these, and then we'll see if we can get some more things. Okay, so like at a very early level, you can have this external thing, like my body can be threatened, right? You might say on the internal, like my aliveness, the feeling of being alive can be threatened, and collectively, like a sense of connection could be threatened. I can't think of what the system version of this is. But
Boston surveys.
Household.
coming in,
The internet.
the internet. Yeah, I think the internet is actually, I think the internet is a system, but I think it belongs here somewhere. We're just going to make it up.
What do you mean by system?
A system is like I'll give more examples. Okay, so let's say later on, I'm like, well, like at the next level of development, I'm like, okay, check it out. Like on my internal, like what can be threatened is like my honor or my respect. And you probably know people like this who are like, the most important thing to them is like if you respect them, or and you can think of a society where it's like the worst possible, like this is like, I have to like kill myself if I don't show up in a battle. Like that's like the samurai kind of code or whatever. So then like there might be a system of like a power structure that maintains, it's not like it does exist in the world, but it's not like physically out there, right? Or another system would be like the economy. So certain people are going to be like, yeah, what really threatens me is like if the economy gets fucked up, I'm screwed. But like other people are going to be like, oh no, it's not actually the economy, it's my savings. Like what matters is if I don't care if the economy is crap, like as long as I've got savings, right? I think a similar level of development is like it's worrisome if my like autonomy gets threatened, or my freedom, or the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And then there's some version equivalently in this quadrant, like our collective potential or something like that. Like what could we produce, right? I'm going to give a few others, and then we can just start throwing stuff out, feel it out. So let's keep going. Some of the higher stages, I think, would be, this is where you get into psychological safety, I think is like this level. What could be threatened is my psychology or my psychological safety. What could be threatened is like inclusion. So you'll see people come in and they're like, well, it could be really bad. It's really dangerous if there's not enough inclusion. Or diversity would be another one in this realm. It's like kind of a collective value. Although actually diversity probably is an actual thing. We put like, sorry, I break pens fast. Or you might say like Gaia, or like the planet, or privacy are things that belong up here. These are like actual things in the world. Or you might say like a problem would be like systemic equality. This could be threatened. So let's keep doing this. But the point is like all of these things are things that arise that like you can see that like you can continue to like open out so that they still matter, but like you're not attached to needing them in order to function in society, right? Like you know that like probably all of you know that like if you were suddenly, if your body was like damaged or threatened, you were suddenly in a wheelchair, like you could continue to exist and have a meaningful life. And you definitely know this because you've just been on crutches for how long? Yeah. And still have a meaningful life?
Yeah, very much so. More meaningful.
More meaningful. Right. So my argument is that this probably continues indefinitely. And you could, even if your inclusivity isn't threatened, like you continue to, like you could actually find it more meaningful when you learn to collaborate with it in that way. So let's throw out some more. And
Where do you put the truth?
The truth? I'm going to answer this indirectly. So I think we could do something like, if we wanted to do like, I don't know, like my life purpose could go here. And then I might put up here like somehow like my surrender could be threatened. Like my capacity to trust. Or you could say like the shit that I get like super upset about, I'm going to blow blow some smoke up my ass. Is that what it's called when you like make yourself seem really awesome and like highly developed? Like worried about the way our culture uses language to like enact reality. That's basically what I'm doing in these talks, right? So like for some reason, I think my like my personhood, my humanity is like, oh man, like if we use like trauma in these ways, like it's going to be really harmful. And so like I have to give a talk to like try to like, you know, like gesture the community in the direction of like more honest language and like, yeah, psychological safety, that's trouble. So I want to like, you know, give a talk and like, you know, facilitate the movement of the flow of our conversation in this way. Well, I'm sure like at later stage of development, I'm going to be like, that's cool. Like it's just like you are with your body. Like I can actually get more. This really isn't a threat. Like it really is all okay. Like there is like the ocean of being unfolding as us, and I can super trust that. I'm not there yet, so I just let myself like get worried about this stuff and try not to like get too caught up in it and like hold myself lightly.
I think I'm missing something fundamental about this, the idea of this map. Seems to me that, I don't really quite know what the question is, but like with your example of my body, like I'm still concerned about my body being threatened, but you're right, like if I got injured or even potentially if I died, like there's some me that seems to be not my body. And then kind of the same thing with any of these, like I can see myself like, oh, that might be bad or harmful, but also I'd be okay with any of these being sort of threatened.
Go on.
It seems like you're saying, like you're pointing to the fact that anything that can be threatened really isn't you.
Anything that can be threatened isn't really you. Absolutely. That's absolutely what I'm saying.
Okay. That clarifies something, yeah.
Yeah, that's
experience of
secretly that's what I'm saying the whole time. You guys are so great. Thank you. Yeah, A Course in Miracles has this beautiful way of summing that up. Like nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
You say in your words.
I
guess farther on. You don't have to.
I like the question. I like the challenge. I mean, my words are like life is collaborating with us for our remembrance of who and what we really are.
It seems like that's why.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the real offering of circling, and it's tricky because no, it's not tricky. That's just the real offering of circling. We're like, man, you can basically like come into a way of being where like you really see the whole universe as a friendly place, and like your biggest challenges are either like your curriculum inviting you to like be, you know, a better version of yourself, or tests that show you your character, show you who you are. You can look forward to that. It's a really different way of operating in the world. And it's this amazing thing where it's like fully inclusive of other people and yet like demanding nothing from them. And like, I love giving these talks and giving these kind of maps and stuff. And actually the 5 principles like of circling they already have this down. So like developmental safety is like own your experience. And as soon as you start making somebody else wrong for not owning your experience, you're not owning your experience anymore. So it's like, it's right there. Like that making somebody wrong that's like the not safe thing. But you don't have to be threatened by it if you're willing to adopt the principle of owning your experience. Or it's like, instead of coaching somebody, which could be like secretly blaming them for being wrong or whatever, you can you can just ask how it is for them. Or you can actually get permission, like, can I guide you directly? And then they get to say yes or no. And like, that's just it's just naturally a better way of being. And you just get it in your bones so that you're just like that all the time. And you're not the annoying person that's constantly trying to give people suggestions for stuff they've already tried. And so then it's just, then people like just naturally, because of that, like if you ever meet somebody that's had like a lot of health challenges, for example, like chances are they have been told by like hundreds of very well-meaning people, like all sorts of crazy remedies, everything from like, you should go see this oncologist to like, you know, you should try this like crystal healing water meditation thing. And it's like almost every single one of those people is like, sure, I'll like, why not? Like, fuck it. Like I've tried everything else, so it hasn't worked. But they secretly in their hearts, like when that happens, they like, there's this pain of being like really alone in their suffering. Because like you come with your well-meaning advice, like assuming that they haven't already looked at it all. They had like, just like kind of forgetting that that they're a human that exists and has their own stuff. And if you've heard of it, like maybe they've heard of it too. And what's crazy is like, so if you just, if even just spending for a second that healthy, beautiful human desire to like help somebody out, and instead like channeling it in like, oh, how is that for you? You just kind of naturally start being with them. And that's what I mean. And being honest about how it is to be with them. You'll find that like, ironically, you end up being way more helpful, and they start opening up, and the connection is rich and beautiful. And like, it's been crazy to me. Sometimes like it's like the most obvious thing. I'll meet somebody like this, and like after a minute, they'll start like crying and be like, it's just so nice to be with somebody who understands. I'm like, I don't even know if I understand. Like, and I'll often tell them that. And then it's like, it's so nice to be with somebody who's just like willing to be direct and honest. And I'm like, great. And it like sets the tone for the whole rest of the relationship. And it's cool, because then if I step out of that, they'll be like, hey, you're not being yourself today. Like, huh? Why are you suddenly giving me advice? And I'm like, I had that choice. Like, is life collaborative? Like, am I, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Thank you. That's helpful. And so their challenge like actually makes me safer in the truest sense of the word, where nothing real can be threatened. That's the end of the topic. Thank you. Thank you guys too online.